And let's go ahead and kick this off. So again, thank you so very much for coming. And today we have quite a few things to talk about, and we're going to focus on testimonial marketing. Now, it's no secret that other trust-based professionals like doctors and lawyers, they have thrived off testimonial marketing in their businesses for a very long time. But of course, with financial advisors, you guys have been prohibited from using testimonials in your marketing for a very long time as well. But that time is finally over. We like to say the prohibition is over, and you have the opportunity now to take advantage of a pretty big mover in the buyer's journey. And we'll talk more about what that actually means. But we want to talk today about the pros, the cons, the benefits, the risks of using testimonials in your marketing as an advisor. What do you need to know about putting them on your website? What do you need to know about some of the other online platforms where you can share your reviews? And what are some proven and practical ideas and really tactical things to help you grab those testimonials from your clients and your prospects, but also promote them in the right places for other prospects and clients to see them front and center? So I'm joined today by Brian Thorp, and Brian's going to introduce himself in just a minute, but a quick housekeeping item since we've got more people joining us. For whatever reason, Zoom is acting funny today. The chat is disabled, but you can use the Q&A box whenever you want to drop a question, a comment, a concern that you might have, whatever that might be. Please feel free to use that. When you registered for this webinar, some of you plugged in your own questions, which was awesome. Thank you for doing that. And we're going to make sure we get through all of your questions. So thank you again for the registration questions. But if you have anything else that comes along, use the Q&A box. All right, I will be quiet now, and let's introduce Brian Thorp, the expert here at Testimonial Marketing. Brian, can you share a little bit today with our attendees, your background and why you're so passionate about testimonials?
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting the webinar this morning, Diana, and appreciate everybody being on today. My background, I worked for Invesco for 22 years, so I've been in financial services over 25 years and really enjoyed the career there, but was ready for something a little more entrepreneurial. And I've always believed that regulatory change creates opportunities for disruption, and that's exactly what we have here. We have this new opportunity for advisors and really wanted to take advantage of that, to be that first mover to help advisors finally get started with testimonial marketing, with online reviews, so that there is that opportunity, as we'll talk about today, to catch up with professionals and other trust-based professions where reviews have just become so important to what they do.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think you have a lot of great insights to share on this topic. Before we move into today's session, which is, folks, very conversational, this is a lot of compliance, sticky language, and we want to make it as simple as possible. So it's a conversation with questions and answers, some that you all submitted yourselves or that you'll be asking throughout the session. But before we get started, I want to launch a poll. I want to understand, who do we have here in the room with us today? And what's your current state of marketing with testimonials? So we'll start with the first question. So some of you would have just seen a poll launched directly on your screen, and we're interested. What is your registration type? Why are we asking this question? You'll learn in today's session, depending on your registration type, whether you're SEC registered or state registered or duly registered, the rules and regulations might look a little bit differently for you. And so we want to make sure we try to give some tailored advice today. So we'll give it about 10 more seconds for this poll. Thanks everyone who's jumped in and answered. Looks like 80% of you have responded, which is great. And about 5 more seconds. Okay. I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results back with you all. So it looks like most of you are state registered on today's call. Some of you are SEC registered. We don't have any duly registered folks, but we do have some NAs. So I'm curious around that one. Feel free to plug your state into the Q&A box. Again, folks, unfortunately, the chat is disabled. We'll fix that next time, but use the Q&A box if you'd like. Otherwise, this is good to know. The next poll I want to launch is on your current state of marketing. So right now, I'm curious, are you currently using testimonials within your marketing? Bradley's in Georgia. Bradley, thanks for sharing that. I grew up in Georgia. I grew up in Warner Robins, Macon, Georgia. I went to Georgia State University in Atlanta. Georgia's always going to be home for me. Thanks for sharing. All right, so we've got some of you answering the poll now. What's your current state of marketing? Yes, go Panthers, woohoo. Quinton's in Nebraska. It's actually a state I've never been to, funny enough. Been to a lot of places, not Nebraska. I was told don't go in the winter. And then we've already got some questions coming in around the regulation. So David, thanks for that question. We will answer that for you as well. In fact, Brian, if you can see David's question now, as we wait for everyone to answer the poll on their current state of testimonial marketing, David asks, for those that are state regulated, how can you find out if your state approves the use of testimonials? Is there a list online for all 50 states?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. And it's also terrific to see so many state registered advisors on the call today. Unfortunately, it's really been, it's exciting to see the SEC that's put forth the rule for SEC registered firms. And fortunately, it's exciting to see several states that are moving forward, syncing up to permit their advisors to also get started with SEC marketing rule and the testimonials and online reviews. What I was saying with unfortunately is that it really creates an uneven playing field for those advisors who aren't yet able to get started with reviews. And so one of the things that I'm excited about, if I can be excited about this, I wish we didn't have to tackle this as an issue, but this summer, as an advocate for state registered advisors in states that can't get started, we're going to be really putting forth an advocacy campaign focused on those states that are still prohibiting testimonials for the very reason that they need to keep in mind the SEC didn't put forth this new opportunity for online reviews for the benefit of advisors to be better marketers. The reason they did it was for consumers. They really wanted to help consumers make more informed and educated hiring decisions because they see that online reviews are pervasive across so many different professions and industries. And so we've got our work cut out for us, and maybe I'll burn a bridge here or there, but I'm really going to try and take a positive approach towards working with states to ensure they understand the real reasons why the SEC put forth this rule. To answer the question specifically around the states that have given the green light, as I like to refer to it, versus those where they're still prohibited, at the end of the call, as a follow-up to the call, we'll share a link to a database that we're maintaining. And unfortunately, there's no real easy just ability to put together like a map with color coding to show which states have officially said the status, whether they're given the green light, whether they're prohibited, because it's really continues to be in flux. So what we do when advisors join Wealth Tender, if we don't already have a firm answer, we're reaching out to states to secure verbatim from the regulator their stance. So real quickly, I'll just read off the states that we refer to as green light states: Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, New Mexico, North Carolina, Vermont, and West Virginia. Now, there may be a couple of others out there that we don't have a fresh update. So if you have fresh, newer information, or if you would like my help to reach out to regulators, I love doing that. So whether you put it in the Q&A or as a follow-up to the call, when we send that follow-up to email to everybody today, if you want to respond back to that, we'll reach out to the regulators and happy to let you know the response that we hear back.
That's awesome, Brian. That's why we love you, because this is your passion. And for you, you're not just dedicated to teaching advisors why this is important, but you're also doing the work on the backside with compliance that a lot of people aren't going to do. So thank you for that. I know someone dropped a question about Texas. They really want Texas to be on the top of that list, but we'll have to do some more research. So we'll circle back with you certainly on that. Many of you answered the poll. Thank you so much. 25% of you are using testimonials in your marketing. 75% of you are not. So this is not surprising to us. I think it's still very fresh and new for a lot of advisors. I'd love to hear more from the 25% of you that are using testimonials in your marketing. Maybe you're using Wealth Tender. Maybe you have another method, but thank you all for sharing your responses here. So we're going to move on. And now that we've set some of the housekeeping and we've kicked off the webinar, now we want to get into the real conversation. There's a lot of good information ahead of us here. So we're going to start, Brian, with the question, why do online reviews matter for advisors? I'm sure there's many ways you could answer this question, but what are the top most important takeaways here?
Absolutely. So let's dive into that. And then just briefly going back to Brian's question about Texas, giddy up, I'm from Texas. And one of the things I would mention around Texas, as well as a number of other states, is that Texas is what I would consider to be a good state. They get it. They want to work with advisors, but they have to jump through some legislative hoops in order to be able to approve the use of testimonials by state registered advisors. So there are a handful of states that I consider to be good states that just have to jump through a couple of hoops. Hopefully in the next quarter or two, we'll see those states become green light states. The ones that we really have to work on are going to be states like California, Washington, Illinois, that are probably not going to be my best friend as we go forward here. So with that, let's dive into the reason why online reviews really matter. And Diana actually brought up a great slide here that speaks to the importance of online reviews and testimonials, because they really do create more of an emotional connection with consumers, with people that are thinking about hiring an advisor. Because when you put yourself in the shoes of somebody who is thinking about hiring an advisor, a lot of times it's on the back of a catalyst. Maybe they just lost their job, or they've just had a child, or they've lost a parent. You know this better than I do. There are so many reasons why people are looking for an advisor, and generally there's that emotional catalyst. And so a consumer can find a lot of information about an advisor on their website, but they're not necessarily going to be able to create that emotional connection unless there's that ability to get to know what people think about them. And so that's where online reviews and testimonials can really be powerful. On this slide, a couple of things I would highlight. Diana shared some stats here that reflect how important reviews have become. And clearly, if we think about reviews in our own personal lives, we know that they've just become pervasive, whether we're looking for a restaurant, a hotel, or even hiring a plumber. And I'll pick on that example for a minute. I mean, think about having a plumber come into your house, and maybe they're just fixing a toilet, but the first thing many of us do is we're going online and we just assume that they're going to have all the proper credentials to do the work. What we're looking for are the online reviews to understand what other people have said about the experience working with them and having them come into their house. So thinking about as a financial advisor, you're really entering somebody's financial house, and the power of reviews to really connect you with that consumer and provide them with the feeling and what it's going to be like to work with you can be really valuable and important. One of the things I would also highlight on this slide that I think is really interesting, if you look in the bottom right, 47%, nearly half of consumers are willing to pay more for a business with higher reviews. And so if we're thinking about fee compression and that concern around the value of advice, and I think many financial advisors deliver incredible advice and should be well compensated for that. If you have positive reviews, we've seen this hold true in other businesses, that can actually help you ensure that you can deliver the value that you provide at the price point that's warranted for your services. So definitely something that I think is important to recognize there.
I totally agree. And I'll add, we've got Nikki Clark in our chat box right now, our makeshift chat box. She says, anxiety relief is a big one. And that really just resonates with me as somebody who's type A personality, high anxiety functioning individual. I have to look at reviews because it's going to help me in my buying journey reduce that anxiety. So this is not just physical, this is not just factual or logical, this is emotional as well. And I know, Brian, you're going to talk a little bit more about emotions, but let's talk about doctors and lawyers and how, reviews have really set them up for success.
Yeah, I really think this is a great area to consider, because when you think about working with a doctor, working with a lawyer, these are other what I refer to as trust-based professions. You're not going to become a patient of a doctor or a client of an attorney unless you really feel that you can trust them. And so again, you can go to their websites and learn about who they are and what they do, but it's really those reviews that relieve that anxiety, as Nikki asks, and provides that sense of comfort that this is somebody that we'd be interested in working with. And so a couple of things that we just kind of highlighted on this slide, and one that I think is really interesting, 83% of people actually say they trust online reviews and ratings of doctors even more than a personal recommendation. And at first, that may sound a little peculiar, but if you think about it, even if you have a referral for a doctor from somebody you know, the first thing you're probably going to do is go to Google and look at reviews to see what other people are saying. Or in many instances, and in fact, in most instances for doctors and lawyers, even though unlike advisors, and we'll talk about this, they can have Google reviews, most people are going to sites that help people find a doctor, that help people find a lawyer. And those online review platforms is where they're learning about doctors, lawyers, and the experience shared by other consumers. So it's, I think, a really just great example of what's to come. And I think now that reviews are permitted, it's just going to be a matter of time before we see similar statistics from consumers as they're looking for financial advisors in terms of the value of reviews.
Couldn't agree more. And I know in this promotion of the webinar, we asked the question, will you get that call? Because the advisors who do have the positive reviews, imagine which way is the consumer going to go? Well, they've got some great reviews. They have nothing, or maybe they have one, but really, I think the majority here is nothing. And so who's going to get that call, right? And we want you guys to get that call. So let's continue on. I love what you had to share about doctors and lawyers. I think it's important to compare them, right? Being those trust-based professionals. What about some new research and survey data in industry specific? Brian, I'd love for you to talk to this.
Sure. So we're going to be putting a poll into market later this year to get some more specific details from consumers that are interested in hiring advisors. And I think this example on the page from Bright Local, a survey conducted earlier this year, is indicative of what's to come, as well as how consumers are evaluating financial service providers outside of the financial advice. So, banking and other areas where reviews have been permitted. And it speaks for itself. And again, perhaps no surprise, people are looking to reviews to understand if they can trust this very important area with people and their money.
Yep, 100%. And anything you wanted to add here before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, so we've talked about this, right? So there's facts, there's emotions. As we think about that hiring decision, people can look to your website as an advisor. They can learn about your education, your credentials, years of experience, and they can do that with pretty much every advisor out there, which is great. And that's really baseline, but it really comes down next to emotion. And we all know how powerful personal referrals are. And the very reason for that is because that's emotional. It's somebody sharing how their advisor makes them feel. So the opportunity to take those personal recommendations offline and bring them online is really going to be a game changer in terms of providing that emotional connection in addition to the facts. And as Diana was suggesting earlier, this can be really what helps advisors set themselves apart from those who don't have reviews online. So thinking about it another way, if somebody receives a referral to 3 advisors and they can find reviews for one, but not the other 2, that not only raises a bit of a question as to why this one individual doesn't have reviews, but also helps them feel that much more connected to the individual who does. So again, for state registered advisors, I know this is frustrating to hear if you're in a state that's still prohibiting reviews, but for all of these reasons, this is why we're really going to be being a champion for you on this particular area, because it really is an uneven playing field that's incredibly unfair, not just to you, but also to consumers that don't have access to this information. The last thing that I would just mention is beyond the emotional connection with consumers, there's also an important element here from a digital perspective. So online reviews also play a powerful role in sending positive trust signals to search engines. So just as an example, when you receive reviews on a profile page on Wealth Tender, those reviews start to get received by Google. And generally, after an advisor in our community has around 5 reviews on their profile, Google is indexing those gold stars start to appear. And that's really helping the search engines feel more confident about displaying a financial advisor in search results based upon those trust signals that are being sent to their algorithms. So a lot of value here, not just from an emotional perspective with consumers, but also really a digital imperative for advisors to succeed online.
I'm really glad you shared that. I think that was actually one of the questions we had gotten around, if I get Wealth Tender reviews, how does that support the Google algorithm and the search ranking? So thanks for answering that. The last thing I'll add here, I was at the FPA retreat a week ago, and I was speaking to a room of advisors and planners. And we were talking about storytelling and the emotional side of storytelling and why that's so important for advisors. Hey, here's who I am, here's how I'm different, and here's my special sauce, right? This is my sauce versus the advisor down the street. And a lot of that is emotionally evoking, right? And that's going to help move people along their journey because, like, as you see here, buying decisions aren't just based on facts, they're based heavily on emotion. But the other way to think about this, folks, is let your clients tell your story for you. This is an amazing way to let your clients tell your story for you. They're writing their experience. This is getting shared online. Other people are reading it. And that's part of this emotional side of buying. It truly is storytelling by someone else who's telling their story, but it's also telling your story at the same time. So powerful all the way around. All right, let's move into the next question. I think we've talked a lot already about compliance, but there is more to know. And I think on this topic specifically, Brian, you do a great job of sort of laying out the information in an easy way, an easy to understand way. So let's talk about it. What do advisors need to know about compliance?
Sure. So a few things. We've obviously touched on the state registered advisors. On that front, one thing that I would mention, there's an organization called Nassau, which is a securities association of state regulators. And for those states that haven't yet given the green light, many of them are referring to Nassau and suggesting that they're waiting for guidance in anticipation of what's referred to as a model rule. This would be a rule that Nassau puts out, essentially its own version of the SEC marketing rule, and why they can't just sync up to the SEC marketing rule and feel obligated to come up with their own. That's a little bit silly in my opinion, but nonetheless, ideally, hopefully later this year, we'll see something from Nassau, which will hopefully streamline for those states that haven't yet given the green light, a path forward to move forward more quickly. So something to keep an eye on, and again, something that we're very much focused on and advocating for as well. Then coming back to the registration, whether with the SEC or FINRA, on this particular slide, we can see a couple of the things that are out there. Since we've talked about both SEC and state registered, we'll talk a little bit more about what the SEC expects and what we think states will be requiring as well. But with registered reps, if you're duly registered as an example, FINRA has actually permitted testimonials. However, you haven't seen many advisors with testimonials, even though FINRA has permitted them for years. And that's primarily because a lot of advisors who are duly registered, if they do have a FINRA license, work for an organization that may also be registered with the SEC. And therefore, until this new SEC marketing rule came about, they didn't want to take that risk of allowing testimonials when an advisor also is registered on the SEC front. Plus, as you're well aware, there are a number of very large organizations that report into FINRA that just take the easy way out a lot of times and saying, we'd rather be the business prevention department. So now I think there will be more pressure on those firms to allow their advisors and or registered reps to get started. With that said, Diana, on the next slide, we'll take just a couple of looks at the FINRA rule, which I think even if you're purely SEC registered or state registered is informative. So FINRA does again permit testimonials, and it fits neatly within the SEC marketing rule and what we see many states requiring in terms of very much a disclosure-based approach. A few things that FINRA requires that aren't required by the SEC is simply a statement indicating no guarantee of future results. Results will vary. Those types of things that are very much oriented around investments. And a lot of the reason why reviews historically have been prohibited have been concerns by the regulators that reviews, testimonials, would be focused on investment performance and overly promissory. And of course, that's just not what people are writing about when they're writing reviews. Again, it's more the emotional way an advisor makes them feel. But that's why you see some of these legacy types of concerns reflected in the types of disclosures that they're looking for.
That's helpful. I think I'd love to show, and I know we've got one on the next slide, what a compliant review might look like and how this looks in action.
Perfect. So on this particular slide, this is an example of a review and the format that we created on Wealth Tender to address what the SEC is looking for. And again, if you are duly registered, what can accommodate those additional disclosures that FINRA is looking for as well. So the FINRA regulations fit neatly within the SEC rule. And to the SEC's credit, they really did a nice job here of saying, look, we've all opened a magazine and seen an ad for a pharmaceutical company, and then on the back of the ad is literally a full page of disclosures in very tiny print. So the SEC said, we don't want to do that. What we want to ensure is that within the, quote, four corners of a review, that the disclosures are prominently presented, clearly presented, at the same font size. They're right there, and very specifically three things, but also they need to be brief and succinct, indicating whether or not the person who wrote the review is a current client of the financial advisor, or if they've never been a client, either of which is totally fine. It simply needs to be disclosed. Then they want to know if the individual who wrote the review was compensated in any form, or if there was no compensation, and then if there are any material conflicts of interest. So it's really that straightforward. And they very explicitly say, do not put a typical compliance block of text. They want these to be very short, very succinct. There is the opportunity to add additional disclosures. And you can see the example on this page where there's a little show more. So that particular disclosure can be expanded, and that can be that big block of text if you have a compliance officer that requires it. But those three clear and prominent disclosures just above literally have to be the same font size. They have to be right there within the four corners of the review. But again, to the SEC's credit, I think they did a really nice job of ensuring that these are very simple, straightforward, plain English. And in many instances, what we see is it's the review person that wrote the review is a current client. They were not compensated, and there are no material conflicts of interest. So it's a very straightforward process.
And that's what you said, the majority of what we're seeing, correct, with these reviews?
Correct. So today we're approaching 500 reviews of financial advisors on Wealth Tender, and I would say 90+% are current clients, no compensation, no conflicts of interest.
Love it. Anyone, if you've got questions, don't forget, you can drop it in the Q&A box. I think you made some great points here, Brian. Thank you for breaking down the compliance information in an easy to understand way. And I love this example. There's a lot of nuance here, folks, but there's also a simplicity to it. As long as you follow this format, you are in compliance. And this is exactly why Wealth Tender was created, to help advisors have an easy way to get these compliant testimonials out on their website and in their marketing. So Brian, let's move along and talk about, in my opinion, when you talk about reviews, the pretty big elephant in the room, which is Google or Yelp. And can I ask for my clients to leave me reviews on Google or Yelp? How does this work?
Sure. So very popular question. And just yesterday, I was on a webinar with a prominent securities attorney, and his words were compliance officers and legal departments are terrified of Google reviews, which of course is one of the reasons, to your point, why we created Wealth Tender. Now, just to be clear, unsolicited reviews as a financial advisor, if you have ever received and if you continue to receive reviews that you didn't request, whether they're on Google or Yelp, 100% fine. And to be clear, that's terrific. Obviously, it's great if you have those types of reviews that are out there. Today, as we're talking about getting started with proactively asking for reviews, what we're going to look at here with Yelp and Google are why it's problematic. So with Yelp, it's really interesting. And the slide that Diana has shared is directly from Yelp's official website, where they actually very intentionally focus on weeding out solicited reviews, which sounds counterintuitive to the very nature of their business, because you see Yelp stickers in restaurants where they're clearly effectively encouraging business owners to get the word out about Yelp. So a little self-serving on their part, but at the same time, if their algorithms are going through and looking at the reviews, they actually demote and really try to hide those reviews. So they're not really interested in supporting our business. And again, as we were just looking at on that prior slide with the disclosures that are required by the SEC, that's why sites like Yelp and Google are problematic, because they're not designed to accommodate the disclosures that the SEC is looking for. The other issue, and we'll talk about this with Google reviews, are the challenges that it creates if a consumer, if you asked for a review on one of these platforms and the client or the consumer writes a review and includes language that's prohibited, if it's suggesting that you deliver 20% performance monthly compounded, that's not permissible. And there are a few things that we need as an industry to be very cognizant of. And so the SEC put forth those types of stipulations. And so On a site like Yelp or Google, if those types of reviews come in, you're not really going to have that ability to go in and edit them. And if you requested that review on a platform that's not accommodative to that, that's where you're really going to be in trouble. So you may hear compliance officers use terms like entanglement and adoption. So when you link out to sites like Yelp, like Google, you're actually entangling or adopting that content. And that's where it becomes really problematic. So then looking at, go ahead, Diana.
Oh, no, you go ahead. I just think this is the specific question and uncertainty that a lot of advisors have. And I think the bigger question becomes, well, Yelp and Google, these are great for SEO. I would want my reviews to be there. But folks, as you just heard Brian say, you can't actually solicit reviews. It's against some of their policies. And in many cases, when you do, it ends up getting deleted. So it's almost a waste of time. I don't know if you would agree with that, Brian, in certain cases. What else would you say about Google or Yelp and what advisors should be careful with?
Yeah, so a few things here. And again, obviously, Google and Yelp are terrific platforms. They're great for what they do. They're just not great for our industry. And also looking at other trust-based professions, doctors, lawyers, they don't have the prohibition, but they also are very much focused on using dedicated online review platforms specific to the industry, because that's where people are going when they're looking for a doctor or looking for a lawyer. And of course, people are out there on Google and Yelp as well. So if the SEC were to come around and say Google and Yelp are great, we're totally great with that, but we also know there's a lot of things that we're delivering that, just like we've seen in other industries and professions, really how we've emulated other websites in those industries that we know works well to help people find a doctor, to help people find a lawyer, in our case, to help people find a financial advisor, is a really distinguishing factor. But specifically on Google reviews, since we have this slide up here, Google is an interesting animal. So there's a few things. One, as a financial advisor, if you do have reviews from Google, the individual that writes that review has to be fully disclosed. So whatever their name is for their Google account, their full name will be displayed out there. So if you have clients that are sensitive to that and want to respect their privacy or anonymity, Google's not going to be a good platform for that. Or if you're worried about other financial advisors looking at your client list on Google, that could be problematic. So a platform like Wealth Tender, we can work with you and work with your clients to ensure that they can preserve that anonymity, or maybe first name, last initial. But the SEC does permit anonymous reviews. However, you still have to provide those disclosures. So in other words, if somebody wants to be publicly anonymous, you still have the responsibility to indicate whether that individual is a current client, if they were compensated, and any conflicts of interest. So the other thing I would highlight about Google reviews, and we've seen this with multiple advisors, when reviews are submitted, sometimes reviews actually will just get deleted, and Google's algorithms will just delete very legitimate reviews. And in fact, on the next slide, we share an example of a really terrific review, a glowing review. This is an actual review of a financial advisor. And I can't understand when looking at it what it is that Google's algorithms had a problem with, because while it's a glowing review, it doesn't appear to have any content that is inflammatory or a risk in any way. But nonetheless, the review disappeared. And when you as an advisor reach out to ask Google what happened to that review, you just get an automated response back that says, sometimes our algorithms report and remove legitimate reviews. And by the way, after it's removed, we can't reinstate it. So that's not a good experience for consumers, and something just to kind of keep in mind on that front as well.
I completely agree. And as I mentioned before, it almost feels as though it was all just a big waste of time for everyone. And this, like you mentioned, is a glowing review. So it's really unfortunate the advisor went through this. I think things will obviously change as we progress, and this entire concept of testimonial marketing for advisors evolves with regulation. But as of today, this is a pretty big pain point. This is something, if I were an advisor, I would not want to deal with. So let's move into the next question here in the webinar. You've given us some great information about the basis for reviews, the emotional side of buying, and where does compliance play? If you're registered with your state, with your SEC, can you use reviews? What about Google? What about Yelp? But I want to talk a little bit now about other platforms. So where really should advisors ask their clients to write their reviews? If Google is not allowing solicitation, or Yelp, and there's obviously Wealth Tender, but I want to talk about where else they can ask for reviews. So Brian, I'd love for you to talk to this.
Sure. So once you have the green light to get started with reviews, and again, there are some prerequisites in terms of updating your firm policies and procedures. We're going to share a playbook that provides a lot of details on how to do that after the end of this call, including resources. You can fill in the blanks, really trying to make it easy for the advisors in our community and elsewhere to get started with those free tools and resources. Once you're able to get started, definitely you want to have testimonials, online reviews on your website. We offer tools for advisors in our community to not only collect and promote reviews on Wealth Tender, but also to embed a fully compliant widget on the advisor's website to both collect and display reviews as well. So that's a tool that we make available, but we definitely encourage you, even if you don't choose a platform like Wealth Tender, to incorporate testimonials on your site. And there's multiple ways that you can do it. One of the great things about doing it on your site is you don't have to worry about the challenges with sites like Google and Yelp, because you should be able to work with your website provider and easily incorporate the disclosures that the SEC is looking for. Now, with that said, one of the challenges of having reviews on your site is that's only great for people that find their way to your website, right? And that's not really going to offer the SEO benefits that you get of having reviews on a third-party reviews platform that's really recognized by Google as exactly that. So what we provide on this slide in that column on the left, one, only your site, is the fact that it's a great place on your website to include those fully compliant testimonials, but you're not getting those SEO benefits and the reviews aren't going to appear in Google search results. So in the middle column, we talk about what we think is really the best of both worlds, where you can get the reviews, again, using Wealth Tender tools, either on your site or on the Wealth Tender platform, or both, and then gain the SEO benefits of being featured not only on the Wealth Tender website, but also having those reviews get picked up by Google. They can help you rank higher in search results and send those positive trust signals to their algorithms. And then on the far right, we actually do have a number of advisors that have received unsolicited reviews on Google. So we can import those to Wealth Tender. And what's great about that, again, with a Google review, if it's unsolicited, if somebody sees it, that's terrific, but you can't tell somebody, hey, go look at my Google reviews. What you can do is import those Google reviews to a compliant platform like Wealth Tender, and then add the appropriate disclosures. And now you can suggest to prospects, here are reviews that I received, whether you received them on Wealth Tender or you received them on Google and imported them or imported them from another site. And then with our tools, you could also have those displayed fully compliant on your website as well. So really trying to provide lots of flexibility for advisors, but definitely a big fan that beyond just your own website, there are benefits to having reviews on a third-party compliant platform.
Yeah, wonderful. And I like the breakdown here, how you've got this in columns. I think first and foremost, yes, your website is a very important place to have reviews. You spoke a little bit to this in this slide, but I want to go a little bit deeper on why Wealth Tender. The website is important, as I just mentioned, as you mentioned. What other benefits are there to having a third-party platform like Wealth Tender, where you've got a profile and you've got your reviews listed?
Sure. So we chatted about this a little bit earlier. If you're looking for a doctor, it's quite often you're going to be looking on a find a doctor site, whether it's ZocDoc or WebMD, or if you're looking for a lawyer, you're going to likely land on one of those sites that's specifically focused on finding an attorney. And in many instances, it's not because you necessarily know the name of those particular platforms. It's because you're doing a Google search to find an attorney for a particular type of whatever case you're going through. So hopefully it's not criminal defense, but whatever it is that you're looking for, it's quite likely that the articles that are going to pop up are going to take you back to one of those industry leading sites that help people find a doctor or help people find a lawyer, because they have top ranking articles relevant to keywords people are looking for. So that's what we've done with Wealth Tender as well. We've really focused on emulating that model. Whereas you can see on this slide, if you were to Google high net worth wealth management, virtual financial advisors, flat fee financial advisors, we have over 1,000 articles on Wealth Tender. And they're not all on the top of Google, but a lot of the really important ones are. And so our goal is to ensure that when people are looking for a financial advisor around their particular needs, that they're increasingly finding content from Wealth Tender, they're coming to our site, and then they're getting introduced to the financial advisors in our community. So again, not rocket science, but we've really just tried to replicate best practices of what we've seen work really well in other trust-based professions.
Yeah, and you've done a fantastic job of it. I mean, since I joined the Wealth Tender community as chief evangelist, I'm now getting the alerts from the community, and it's like every single day there is some reporter looking for an advisor's take and expertise. Aside from that, the benefits of the domain authority. I know we're going to talk a little bit about that in just a second, and we're going to show you a graph that I think is worth gold when thinking about which platforms to get listed on. So anything you want to speak to this slide, Brian?
Yeah, so I'll just keep it real quick because I don't want to distract from the Q&A on the testimonial questions. But we've certainly made a lot of progress. It's been a lot of fun building the site. We've had over 500,000 people that visited the site in the last 12 months. And that's what we're really focused on, reinvesting back in content on the site that's helping us rank for more keywords and ultimately creating more opportunities for advisors to get featured on the site, to get found on the site, and ultimately gain those multiple shots on goal through being featured in different articles and resources. And then on the next slide, as you mentioned, we can see a reflection of the domain authority that we've established within the industry, really industry leading. And so one of the things that I would highlight, if you can go to the next slide, I think, Diana, the domain authority there shown on the left is benefiting advisors in our community. So as an advisor, when your profile page is created, usually within about 5 days, even if you don't have reviews, your profile page from Wealth Tender is going to start to appear very prominently on Google for relevant search terms. So really helping advisors better manage what people find when they're looking for you online. And the chart on the right is just a reflection again of the importance of driving high quality consumer traffic to the site. So that's something that we continue to be focused on as well.
And this is awesome. I think, again, if I'm an advisor looking at which platform should I be on, and, I'm not here to say it should only be one, but if there were one that I was going to invest my time and money into, this is a clear take on who's going to have a very strong SEO authority, domain authority, where if I'm on that platform, will I get pushed to that first page of Google or those prominent Google results? You can clearly see here, Wealth Tender is in the lead, which is exciting. Now, we have a question here from David, which says, what are the design and disclosure requirements when sharing testimonials on your website? So I'm just going to go back here a few slides. And Brian, if you want to talk to this question just briefly, and then we'll move on to the last bit of the webinar and all the other questions that we have.
Sure. So under the SEC marketing rule, the disclosure requirements are that the 3 clear and prominent disclosures, so looking at those bullets that you see just below the content of the review, whether it's on a site like Wealth Tender or on an advisor's website, that's what needs to be presented. And in fact, there's a little bit more complication to it when we talk about how a review could potentially be featured on social media. Sites like Twitter just really aren't going to work because you just don't have enough characters to include the disclosures. But if you wanted to include a testimonial such as this on a site like LinkedIn, where you have the ability to provide more fulsome response, there's a lot of the detail that you can provide, such as these disclosures. And again, there's a little bit more technicality to it in terms of some things that you do need to then link to a representative list of all of your reviews. And we do provide more details around that within the playbook that we'll share after this call. But importantly, just keep in mind, it's really a disclosure-oriented rule, and especially with those 3 clear and prominent disclosures, that's really what the SEC is most interested in wherever you have reviews published.
Perfect. Awesome. Now let's move into the last bit of the webinar. And folks, we've got a couple of special giveaways for you. So if you stay tuned till the end, you'll get a deep discount and a really cool giveaway that'll be very helpful for you in navigating testimonial marketing. How can advisors effectively ask for a review? I think for some advisors, the topic might feel awkward. The question might be awkward. Are there any best practices you can share there?
Sure. So at the outset, the SEC does request that advisors not cherry pick. So they don't want advisors just reaching out to their favorite clients. They want to know that people have reached out to all of their clients at the outset. And then after that, you can really incorporate requests for reviews into your day-to-day business activities, whether maybe you've completed a financial plan and a week after you send a request for reviews. But what I would suggest, and just based on the experience we've seen from all of the advisors in our community that have been able to get started with reviews and had the same concerns, the fear of asking for a review in hindsight, all of them have been absolutely thrilled with the responses they've received. Of the nearly 500 reviews we've seen come in, there's been nothing but 5-star reviews, with the exception of 2 4-star reviews. And the responses were still glowing. They were simply people that said they only give out 5-star reviews to people like their granddaughter in a recital. So it's truly been terrific to see. And within the playbook we'll share after today's call, we have a template that we recommend, and really just keeping it, fairly short and succinct. And in fact, I'll just read a little bit from it. I'm reaching out to you and each of my clients this morning to thank you for trusting me to help you achieve your financial goals. I'd be grateful if you could write a review about your experience working with me as a valued client of our firm. These reviews only take a couple of minutes and help other people looking for a financial advisor determine if we may be a good fit to work together. Of course, writing a review is entirely optional, and I appreciate your consideration. Here's a link where you can write a review. So very short and sweet. There's a little bit more to it than that, and obviously you can personalize it and make it your own. Thank you very much, Nikki. Appreciate the feedback. And we provide that along with similar templates, because the other thing we haven't talked about is beyond your current clients, or former clients for that matter, you also have an opportunity to reach out to other people to write a review. So we share a template in terms of how you can reach out to acquaintances, centers of influence, others who can share their experience working with you, or perhaps it's a nonprofit in the community and it's more somebody talking about your character and what it's like to know you as a person.
Wow. So 2 takeaways there that I think are really important. It's not just your clients, right? Ask your centers of influence, ask partners, ask people in the community around your business that you've made a positive impact on. I really like that takeaway. The second is the language, which we'll share with all of you in the playbook that you'll get. Just stay with us here till the end of the webinar. And I think the last is something I have a question for you on. You mentioned most of the reviews that your advisors have gotten on Wealth Tender have been positive. And I think this is a fear that advisors have around asking for those reviews, or even, let's call it, some might think this is opening up a can of worms that I just don't want to open. But let's set some expectations here. Let's sort of do a reality check. How, if advisors get a negative review, how is it that they can best deal with those reviews? And what's your take on the topic?
Yeah, so for starters, again, we can look to other trust-based professions, doctors, lawyers. And again, if a doctor or a lawyer has been in practice for multiple years, as most have, there's likely going to be that weird 1-star review. And that's natural, it's human. So first and foremost, don't worry too much about a negative review. As long as you're a good person and you do a great job. The number one thing you can do is continue to ensure that you're great at getting terrific reviews from the people that you have a great relationship with, right? So essentially, burying a 1-star review. But importantly, too, when you add disclosures to a review, including, let's say, a 1-star review, you can incorporate your own feedback, because generally there's 2 sides to the story. And again, just as you or I, whether it's hiring a plumber or thinking about a hotel and we're reading online reviews, of course, we see that 1-star review and it may perk us up, but ultimately, a lot of times we're like, oh man, this person's a bit of a whack job, right? Because we can see all those positive reviews and tell that this is just that one person, that everybody has that problem child client. With all of that said, again, one of the benefits of being on a site like Wealth Tender versus Google or Yelp, once a review is on a site like Google or Yelp, it's pretty much there to stay unless Google's algorithm mysteriously deletes it, right? But on Wealth Tender, you do have the opportunity to turn off reviews entirely. So if you or your compliance officer decide we just don't want to be in the reviews game, you can't cherry pick if you have the reviews feature turned on, but by default, that feature is turned off. So many advisors in our community are state registered, haven't yet been able to get started, have not turned on that feature so they can take advantage of all the other benefits of the platform. But if they do get started with reviews and for whatever reason, the regulator comes back and says, never mind, reviews aren't permitted, whatever the case may be, you can turn that feature off entirely and then no longer have any negative reviews. The other thing I would mention too is, let's say you collect 20 reviews, you have 1 negative review. That's not a bad place to be. You've got great positive reviews and just 1 negative. What you can do on your website, let's say your homepage as an example, you can cherry pick there. You can cherry pick and just select a carousel of maybe 3 or 4 reviews, display those, provide the appropriate disclosures. Now, when you do selectively promote reviews, the SEC requires that you include a link So consumers can see all of your reviews, and the disclosure needs to indicate that the reviews you've chosen may not be representative of all of your reviews or of every client's experience. So there are ways, even if you have a one-star review in one particular place, to be able to, address that, whether selectively choosing and providing that disclosure, or again, just collecting multiple five-star reviews, because your clients like you. And we clearly see that with all of the advisors in our community. So really nothing to worry about there.
Love that. So many good takeaways. So many good takeaways. Because we're limited on time, I do want to move forward into our audience Q&A. And I want to point out one comment that Michelle left for everyone before she had to hop off the webinar. She says, I appreciate how much Wealth Tender has helped with my website's SEO. And so thank you, Michelle, for sharing that. She had to hop off. She's in Colorado, so she's really looking forward to going through the playbook that we're going to send to everyone. But before we start with these audience questions and answers, these are questions that some of you have submitted either during the webinar that we weren't able to get to, or you submitted it when you registered. I do want to launch just one more poll here. So give me a second. We'll go back here to this slide. I'm curious, based on what everyone has learned here today, how many of you are interested in learning more about Wealth Tender, whether that's on a one-on-one conversation, you want us to send you some more information about the platform, how can you get your profile listed, what are the different pricing options, what's available to you? Let us know. And maybe it's not right now. We appreciate your transparency. We know we've all got a lot going on in our lives. So if you can't do it now, that's totally okay. But we'll make sure we reach out in the future. Bradley, thanks so much for coming. It's okay if you can't stick around to the end to get the playbook. In fact, if you guys would like, I'll just zip ahead really quickly here. The playbook is this. You'll get it in your email. And for those of you that do want to learn more about Wealth Tender, or you're just ready to sign up, feel free to go to wealthtender.com/grow and take a look at the different options, take a look at the platform, go through it as if you were a consumer yourself looking for an advisor. And if you are excited and you really want to sign up, you're welcome, Brad. Then there's a code here for 50% off. So I'll actually leave this slide up and let's go through some of these questions here, Brian. Now, the first one was something you've already answered, and you gave a great example too. What is the best way to gather testimonials? So we talked about how do you ask, how do you go about that? The playbook will have the template for you. And there was a lot of other great takeaways. In fact, I think it'd be good to send these slides along with the playbook. So we'll do that too. And then the second one, are Wealth Tender's reviews also housed on Google for SEO and Google My Business purposes? Brian, you answered that question as well. Can you just one more time give a good sentence or two around that indexing?
Yeah, and I think this gets back to the fact that if we can't, as advisors, specifically request reviews on Google, the next best thing being on a reviews platform that is recognized by Google as a reviews platform that's pulling in those reviews, pulling in those gold stars, you're really getting a lot of great bang for the buck there in terms of the positive trust signals that's sending to their algorithms, helping you rank higher, and the visibility that it creates for people when they do Google you and they see those stars, and they can easily check out the reviews for you via Google.
Yep. Awesome. Okay. And then the next question is, does the state of Oklahoma allow for testimonials? Was Oklahoma on the green list?
Unfortunately, Oklahoma is not okay. So they are prohibiting, as of just a couple of days ago, I got feedback from them. And again, as part of our follow-up email, we'll make sure we provide the list to the database we're maintaining with the states that are green light or where it's still prohibited.
Awesome. How about this one? If my state regulator doesn't allow me to use testimonials or endorsements, then what other avenues might I consider?
Yeah, so I think this gets back to the emotional connection we're trying to create, right? So reviews accomplish that in spades. If you don't have the opportunity yet to get started with reviews from actual clients, thinking about hypotheticals, if you're permitted to use basically case studies of hypothetical clients, which many advisors have been able to do, starts to at least provide a bit of an experience, but also, very importantly, a lot of what we're focused on Wealth Tender is helping people get to know the financial advisor through question and answer style articles. It helps to warm them up, and then and certainly encourage advisors to also use video, use other things on their website to help people get to know who they are. And that can be done through video. It can be done through just articles and helping people know what's going on with you as a human in your real life, so that you come across as more human and creating that emotional connection that you may not be able to do just yet with actual testimonials.
Love it. Now, one more here that I think is powerful for everyone to hear. Since RIA is under 100 million, aren't regulated by state of domicile, I can't use testimonials. Any advice around this?
So I think that probably comes back to what we were just talking about, that if you are state registered, we'll have to wait until we kind of get that green light. And so again, we'll continue to advocate on that front. But in the interim, anything that you can do just to create more of an emotional connection is really going to be what I would suggest.
Agreed. And on that note, this next question will help you do just that. So someone asked about video testimonials, and I think the power of video in general, but video testimonials, he says, why aren't financial advisors using them?
Yeah, I think this just comes back to the fact that there are still so many financial advisors that treat their website like a digital business card and haven't done much beyond that. So it's a terrific opportunity for advisors to stand out with a differentiated approach. And many advisors may not necessarily be as comfortable with video, and so there's a lot of things you can do with articles, blog posts, and again, helping people get to know you a little bit more personally. But then for videos, if you can get started with testimonials, that's going to be an increasingly popular opportunity. And what we recommend is for advisors that, let's say they're on Wealth Tender, they start to collect a lot of great reviews from their clients. What you're going to see are certain people that provide a fairly brief review, so maybe not as much content, but then others that might surprise you. And it's like, wow, they put multiple paragraphs into talking about their experience. And you really start to identify, this is the type of individual that I want to sit down with and invite to do a video testimonial with me, because they've clearly taken the time, they've shown they're passionate about really sharing their story, and then turning that into a video is a really tremendous opportunity. So big fan of video testimonials.
Big fan of video overall. I have to agree. Folks, this has been jam-packed with great information. I hope you found it valuable. Feel free to drop a comment in the Q&A box. Let us know what you thought. If there's still any questions we haven't gotten answered for you, feel free to drop them. We'll make sure that we get around to answering those directly with you. The last thing I'll say is, again, wealthtender.com/grow. What I love about Wealth Tender is you can choose to have a free profile set up. It doesn't cost anything extra. In fact, when I went through the entire onboarding process, Brian and his team set up my profile in no time. And I jumped in and everything was already there for me that they carefully took online from my website and other information around my business, which was just awesome. It's a huge time saver. So again, wealthtender.com/grow. Brian, you've been terrific. Thank you so much for dialing in all the way from San Diego, where you're getting ready to attend your NAPFA conference. And everyone, we will catch you on the next webinar. Thanks so much.